So thank you everybody for joining us today about learning about tabletop presses. We are going to be joined by Dan Boston here for the Printing Museum. My name is Adrienne O'Donnell. I'm the Education's Program Manager for the Printing Museum. We are located in Houston, Texas, where we have been for 40 years. So 2022 is an exciting year for us, celebrating our 40th anniversary. And with that, we have taken up a move. So behind me, my virtual background is our former location. We're packed up. We're in the process of moving to the Midtown Museum District of Houston, which we're very excited about. Will be much more visible. And we will have still our museum side and our artist studio sides. And we're most excited about having our artist studios built out just for us so that we can continue offering workshops in letterpress, printing, book arts, and paper making. So that's a little bit about what we do at the Printing Museum. We appreciate donations to help us with our move and supporting the museum so that we're able to continue this programming and share more with others. Dan Boston is our presenter today, and he's an active volunteer printer and instructor in the museum's letterpress studio with longtime interest and experience in hand-setting letterpress type and platen press operation. Currently, he prints in his own studio using lead and photopolymer plates on tabletop presses, entirely for enjoyment. As a teen, he had a very active letterpress printing business, producing tickets, announcements, and stationery. And through the years, he has owned and used a variety of presses. Dan has especially enjoyed demonstrating printing for visitors to the museum's letterpress studio, as well as refurbishing several of the museum's presses. So thank you, Dan. I'm going to hand it over to you and take it away. You just need to unmute so that we can hear you. And you're good.
Good?
Good.
Yeah. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Houston virtually and the Printing Museum online. It's nice and crisp and cool here in Houston this morning. That means it's mid-60s. We don't have the heat or the air conditioning on in the studio because it's just really just perfect. So I'm really glad to be here today. Just a quick background about my interest in printing. I started taking classes when I was in junior high school and developed a printing business in the community where I grew up. That business was then transferred to my brother and then to his girlfriend's brother, who became his brother-in-law. So that business ran for about 10 years. Years later, his father-in-law called me and said, you know, we have your printing press in our basement. What do you want to do with it? Well, I realized how much I enjoyed it and brought it back to our house, brought it back to speed, bought some additional supplies, and have been printing ever since. About 5 years ago, we moved from the Philadelphia area down here to Houston. And unfortunately, I knew it wasn't practical to bring my 4 printing presses at the time. And so sold most of the equipment to a young woman who graduated from Tyler School of Art at Temple University. And she was starting a studio. I was sad to be giving up, you know, a large portion of my collection, but happy that someone who was so interested and into letterpress printing was going to make good use of it. So I have actually been thrilled with what I have here. You're right in my letterpress studio, which is also known as the second bay in our garage that formerly held my car. My wife gets the other bay, and my car's out on the street and has been for about 5 years. So our goal here today is to help you consider how a tabletop press could be right for you, or just to give you some background information. So that would be for those who are thinking about their first purchase just to get started with letterpress printing, or possibly for those who are thinking of a larger press, a floor model press, one that is measured in tonnage, not pounds of weight, and to at least get you to think a little bit of what are you trying to do and what are you trying to learn. And for me, to open the possibility that a tabletop press might be just a thing to get going before you move to that more committed stage. And we'll talk about why that's a little bit more committed. And also, I don't profess to be an expert. I've done it my way and taken some courses and worked with other printers over the years. Nonetheless, some of the information may be useful to you. If you're a longtime printer, you may have other ways of doing things, and I think that's great too. I'd like to learn about them at some point. So why don't we get started? Let's see if we can get that 5-minute PowerPoint going, and we'll just take a look at some of the presses. Oh, there's the first slide. And Jessica's making everything visible. Why don't we go to the next slide? Okay, so this is one of the smaller tabletop presses, and you can see it's got a single handle on the end, and it sort of projects from a stalk, if you will. You press that handle once, and you'll get one impression. The printing area, which is the inside of the frame that holds the type, that frame's called the chase, and I can't read the details from here, but it's either a 3x5 or a 4x6 size. I can tell you I owned a press that looked just about like this. It was, I believe the first one was a 3x5. And I kind of abused it. I broke that stalk and made it inoperable. So that is one of the problems with some of the smaller presses. They can be overused. Why don't we go to the next slide?
I'll tell you what it is.
And you can see it. What is it? Oh, you know what? We need to introduce our videographer, Jessica Snow. She's about 3 or 4 feet from me here. She's the studio manager for the letterpress studio, and it is a graphic designer, accomplished printer, and an artist in her own right. So she says she's not going to interrupt me, but I hope she'll chime in a little bit here during the hour. The next is a Kelsey press, a little bit larger. That's a 5x8. It's got that yoke-shaped or U-shaped handle.
This one's a 3x5 that you can't see it very well, but this one's the 3x5.
This one's the 3x5. Okay, and Kelsey is one of the main manufacturers of smaller tabletop presses, and in fact, we'll look at my Kelsey 6x10, where I do most of my printing here in Houston. So next slide.
So this one is the 5x8, Kelsey.
It keeps,
Now you're on a 5x8, Kelsey.
now we're on a 5x8 Kelsey, a little bit larger. Okay, a little bit larger, but still the same basic configuration and same basic sturdiness to the press. And let's move ahead again.
The Chandler and Price Pilot Press.
Okay, this press made by Chandler and Price is probably the king or queen of tabletop presses. It's made by Chandler and Price. That's the company that makes the most common floor model press that many accomplished letterpress printers actually work with. You can see it looks a little more industrial in its design. It gives it has inside that frame is 6.5 by 10 inches of working space for whatever you're printing. And again, with that lever, you pull it down, make your print, and we'll look at the action in a minute. And you get a single print each time. The floor model presses generally work continuously, and you have to work with the rhythm of the press as you're actually printing. The press works with your rhythm on a tabletop press. So the next slide.
I'll tell you what it is in a second.
Okay.
It's a photo of the pilot press.
You know, I should have printed them out. Okay. Oh, this is an actual pilot press. Can I say whose it is?
Yeah.
It's Jessica's.
Oh, it's mine.
Yes. Are you still in the process of restoring it? And
It prints beautifully now.
Yeah.
So it is restored. And it just prints lovely. So
Yeah.
lovely.
You can't. I mean, I love my presses. You can't do better than the Chandler and Price. Wait, if you're looking to buy one, and all these presses can be found online. Yes, on eBay, but also at briarpress.com, and we'll give you a handout at the end, or make that available to you. It's a wonderful press.
So wonderful press. I
Yeah.
concur.
And it's easy, fairly easy to get parts online. You might have to wait a while. You can get extra chases, that's the frame. You can find them online and at printer spares.
Good
They're
point.
being newly manufactured too.
And they are being manufactured now, so you can, there's enough interest in.
Rollers are easy. The only thing I heard that's not easy to come by is if you have broken feed table arms.
Oh, the feed table arms, I guess you can't. We'll look at that
Yeah.
in a few minutes. Let's go on to the next slide there.
So that's another detail shot of it. So I'm gonna,
It's
Okay, you can look down into, you're looking down into the printing area, the platen, which is the flat surface where the paper goes, and the bed, which is where the type goes. Just again, I brought this to just show you. And from behind, you can see the mechanism that turns the ink disc to keep ink distribution even. And just a general look at the strength, basically, of this press.
a very powerful press.
And it is a powerful press, yes. Okay, next slide. I think we're going to go into the world of floor model presses.
right now we're showing a chase
Right?
locked up.
No, it's a picture with polymer plate on the base.
Oh, okay. And just showing that you can print lead type or polymer based plates, which are easy to have made and easy to use once you take, well, I'm sure we'll offer a short course at the museum at some point in how to work with it.
In February.
In February,
Yeah.
coming up in February.
So if you're interested in polymer, I'll be teaching that class.
Oh, great. Jessica will be teaching that. So that's great. Well, there we are. And this is my friend of 40 years that I sold. It is a golden pearl, and that has a 7-inch by 11-inch printing area inside the chase. And you can see I restored it. I rebuilt the 3 drawers in the paper delivery and receiving area there. Here's the difference. Number one, it's very heavy. Number two, do you notice the flywheel on the left? That keeps this running. And you actually activate the press not with a lever, but with your foot. And you continually pump it like one of the old-fashioned sewing machines. And there is a danger factor with that. We'll take I think we have a side view next. In one of these views, you'll see that I actually have that flywheel chained and locked to the metal base, because with children in the family, if they start playing with that, it's possible to really do some damage if you get your hands caught in between the platen and the printing bed. With tabletop presses, there's no action except when you're pulling down on the lever.
And your hands are occupied, essentially.
And your hands are occupied at that point, so they are not prone to getting into the mechanism. Many of these presses predate OSHA. So
Now she's showing an 8x12 Chandler.
now here's a little larger press that floor model press that it's one of the older original Chandler and Price press. So and you can see it's got
1 second, Dan.
wait, 1 second.
I apologize for that.
Okay, it
Better
is not foot powered. It is powered with a motor. So you've got additional considerations for the electric service required to run the press. You've got a larger flywheel, and but you can print faster. We'll go through what the advantages are. And some of the disadvantages. Good. Why don't we go to the next slide?
She's switched now.
Okay.
Oh, this is my garage as well.
Right. And this is Jessica's Chandler and Price that she's working on, and it is in the process of being restored. You can see the ink disc is on the ground. It's a wonderful press, and it basically has all the function and all the parts needed. I think one of those arms I noticed a repair on, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yep.
Many of these presses are going to have a repair or a little problem here or there. You just need to be aware of that and fully evaluate that. We'll talk about that.
Yeah, it's cast iron and it's got a really strong braze.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's cast iron, and it has been brazed, and there have been no problems, and it doesn't impede the function and the smooth movement of the press. So
this is the Vandercook rocker at the museum now.
okay, so now this is me hand inking a form at the museum when we actually were at the 40, where the museum's been for 40 years. And this is not really what we're talking about today. It's a Vandercook press that is a flatbed press. The type lays flat horizontally. The paper is wrapped around that cylinder. This is a proof press that runs basically the same way. And you make an individual print. That's an entirely different category than a platen press, even a floor model platen press. And these are highly sought after. That would be the slide before this, by artists and people who were interested in printing larger areas and working with larger wood type and those types of forms. You could expect to pay $10,000 to $15,000 for a Vandercook press, and to do months worth of work before it's I mean, you may find one that was just ready to go, but many would require some work and some parts and some expertise that there are only a few people in the country, it seems, who can come and help you with that. But that's, and the other would be, I don't have a view of it, it's kind of a mini version of that Vandercook press. They're called sign presses. It is tabletop, but it doesn't work by the mechanism that we're looking at today.
Like that clamshell.
So there is, the last slide, I think, is just a link to a company that restores old presses. And I'm going to have a hard time seeing it, I think.
Yeah.
So they'll put it in the chat for you later on.
There we go.
I have not purchased from this company. I just, when I need my fix of cool looking printing stuff, I go to this site and they show presses that they've recently restored. And when I looked last, there were about 10 presses done back in August of 2022. They look to be highly functional and beautiful. So I'd just encourage you to take a look there. Not so much, oh, there's a picture of my studio, but we're going to have the real thing here. I will come back to that. Just take a look there, and you'll get an idea of an assortment of tabletop presses. And they're beautiful. Some people actually are into restoring presses. They're really not printers, and they may not know a lot of the details of what it takes to get a fine print. But they just are into restoring machinery and have access to machinists, equipment, or companies that can do things. So apparently that company is one of them. So let's just talk for a minute about the tabletop press as a category and how they compare to other presses. For starters, so you know what's going on, let me just wheel
Next.
my toy in.
You look good. Yeah, you look great.
So this is a official, it's the name. This we'll look at my smaller press first. This press model was originally made by Golding, the same ones in Boston, Massachusetts, the same ones that made my Golding Pearl that I had up north. However, judging from the serial number in here, this was actually made after Golding sold their business to American Type Founders, the largest letterpress printing supplier in the United States. So the castings aren't finished quite as nicely, and all the Golding presses had little gold pinstriping and fancy detailing on them. This does not, but everything else is the same. Okay, so three main areas. You've got ink up here, you've got the type here, and it fits in a frame called the chase. And paper down here in the plat. So three main areas. There are four actions on a platen press. We're moving, the main one that occurs to everyone is we're moving the platen up to the type so we can make an impression. We can transfer ink from the type to the paper. But as you can see, we have to ink it. And these are, it was a big deal when they were first invented, self-inking. The rollers come up here, get some ink, spread it out nicely, and then ink the type. So for every impression that's made, the type gets 2 passes of the rollers. So inking with rollers is the number 2 action. You've got to move these rollers down beyond the frame, all the way up into the little disc reservoir type. The third thing, did you catch that disc moving? The ink disc has to rotate so that the ink is evenly distributed and evenly taken off the disc. And I'll do it again. There we go. And that's, I just took it off. You see the little hammer or pawl back here? That fits on or pushes against these little teeth. I will tell you with tabletop presses, some of them, especially the Kelsey's, this is my Kelsey back here. This, does this have a name? Just
I call it
bracket.
gooseneck.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Gooseneck, or a little bracket that holds the ink disc. Sometimes they break. And you could find one, especially with a Kelsey, you might have to buy a second press for parts. The caution is that for some of them, they'll machine the bracket and then machine the ink disc so that it is exactly level and the rollers just slide perfectly on it and perfectly parallel, but they're not quite interchangeable. So sometimes you may have to have something machined or add a washer back there, that type of thing. Anyway, that's the second or the third movement. So we're bringing the paper up, number one. Number two, we've got the rollers moving. And number three, the ink disc has to turn, so we have even distribution. And then number four, we have these little metal extensions called grippers. And can you see them pretty nicely? Watch them. They're up here. We're going to slide paper on here. We'll have little gauges that hold it where we want. And then as we bring this down, do you see see the grippers actually grip and hold the paper up against the platen before we get to the inked up type. We press it, and then look, as we come away, those grippers stay right up against the platen where the paper is. They'll hold the paper so that the paper pulls away from the ink type. Sometimes that's not really necessary, a lot of times, but if you've got a stiffer ink or you're using a heavier ink or a lot of it, and you have a lot of printed area, the paper may not want to come right off. And if it doesn't, what happens when these rollers come down, they'll pull the paper off and you end up wrapping the paper around the rollers. So that's what grippers do. They also keep the paper in place so it doesn't slide across the type in the very first, 1/8 of an inch of movement. So
got to keep them out of the way of your gauge pins.
yes, right. We use what's called gauge pins to hold the paper in place. So 4 things: bringing the paper up, inking the type, moving the ink disc, and activating the grippers. If you don't need the grippers, they just come off on screws. They're a little dangerous. If you get them where they interfere with the type, you ruin your type, period. It'll smush the lead type. It's done. It goes in what's called bad type that you ruin is called a hell box. That's my hell box. I didn't make too many mistakes. That's 5 years. It's called that because this type is recycled and melted down under a high heat. So it's the hell box. Okay. Smaller presses. So let's turn this around. You can see this arm moving the rollers. We already saw how this ink disc moves. And here's a connecting piece that connects the main rocker arm, which brings the platen up. That's the heaviest piece in the press, connects it to the mechanism for moving the rollers. I can tell you that is probably the weak link in many presses. And you'll find that it's fractured. I purchased a larger version of this official press maybe 8 years ago, and it came by our trusty old US Postal Service in a cardboard box. And when I got it, it had fractured here. And that's such a critical piece that they paid me for the value of it. Then they took the press, which I guess is only fair. But I was very sad not to have that press. I also say that I told myself I'd live with one press because we're downsizing in different ways. But this proves that that's not always true because now I have 2 presses. But I really love this thing.
It's hard to stick to one press.
Right, it's hard to stick to one press. So there's that. And I'm still, this table is called a turtle. It's sort of a utility table on wheels that I can move from press to press, or if I need an extra surface to hold some type that I've set up, I can do that. But it's not all that sturdy, and I'm in the process of making a little oak table where this can be bolted down. I will say any tabletop press that you purchase needs to not just be on this little wooden base. It really should be bolted to the furniture that you make or buy. As the larger LCDs. So let's see. We talked about smaller in size, weight means that all the pieces are smaller. And you are compressing two pieces of metal when you, that's the main action, when you actually bring the paper up and press it into the form or press it to the form. That puts many pieces in tension in the mechanism of the press. And this cast iron is a brittle material. It does better in compression, pushing together, than it does in shear or tension. And they will snap, and you can easily do that. You can do it with a larger floor model press, but I would say you really have to try. When you agree that's true.
They have to fall over practically,
right?
Like tip over.
Right. Right. If this hit the floor, something's going to break. Almost.
Yes. Yeah.
And it may render the whole thing unusable.
Not enough brazing in the world to put it back together.
Right. Right. Humpty Dumpty story. Right. Okay, we talked about that dropping. There are both rarer and more common presses. I would say, just for starters, if you find a Kelsey, that they are more common. And if you find you need a part, or you don't want to move up to a bigger press, you can do that.
I was going to interject. One of the benefits of the Kelsey and the CMPs is that parts are so readily available. So if you're trying to get a price more cost effectively, you're going to probably have to spend some money fixing, repairing it. And Kelsey is a fairly easy fix and repair.
Yes.
As opposed to
this is a little more complicated.
Right.
But it's for its size. It's very sturdily built. Almost every press you're going to get, you're going to need new rollers, and these and the little wheels called trucks that run on the rails like a railroad track at the side of the form. See them? They come up. They don't do anything when they get on the disc. And for most of these, you're talking about $200.
Yes.
A little more maybe. And you get the metal rod that goes through the center called the core, and the trucks, which are the metal pieces. Very important, I would say, to buy the complete set. And I'll give, you do have I think I have a link for you there in the.
There's a number of places.
There are a number of places to do it, but coordinating the diameter, the length, the difference in diameter between the rubber roller and the trucks is all very important.
Critical.
It's critical. In a large press, they may be, especially if they have an automatic feeder, they may print 50,000 copies of something. So those presses run and run and run. You can wear down the rails. But guess what? You're not going to wear down the type. That's changed. So the rollers are going to contact the type more and more. And you can squish ink, not just on the surface of the type, but down on the sides. And that gives a very muddy looking impression that's harder to read, doesn't look professional, etc. So but the advantage of a tabletop press is that that's rarely an issue, because you're making 50 copies, 20 copies, 1,000 copies. It's probably a practical limit for these presses.
That's
And
a
they
great
just don't
point.
get worn that much. So the roller manufacturer can give you the textbook diameters for these pieces. And we're talking thousandths of an inch. It's a very precision deal that you get
Dan,
into.
what do they do if they think their rails are worn?
What do you do if you think your rails are worn?
Like your rollers are just hitting your form too hard.
Right. You can measure the distance between the rails and the bed, and it should be type high. One quick way to do it is to take an absolutely flat piece, such as a piece of furniture, or just something that's flat, run it across the rails, and you can take a piece of pipe that's 0.918 high, which is what everything is. Or I recommend you have it when you find one online, buy it. It's called a type high gauge. And a little piece of trivia for people who are just learning about letterpress printing, all type on all polymer on bases is 0.918 inches high. That's called type high. This is a type high gauge, which gives you the height here, and then you can measure height of type in between these two forms. They're a little bit expensive.
They're very
online,
expensive right now.
because I guess they're rare,
Yes.
but I think this is like 75 bucks.
Yes.
That's pretty expensive.
I think so. Digital
That's why I
micrometer.
never tell my wife about things.
Digital micrometer might work for some people.
Yeah, sure.
Those are a little bit
Yeah.
less
Inside,
expensive.
we're gonna do an inside measure.
Yeah, a digital micrometer
Yep.
is a less expensive tool.
Yeah.
Not considered an antique, so not as
Right.
expensive.
So big point, take home point is that these presses can be safer.
Yeah.
Because of the single action stop and look. Imagine if this is on a motor, there's a flywheel here and it's making that action. You've got to be in sync with that, which is kind of fun once you get the hang of it. And at the printing museum, we'll have all of these types of presses, and there'll be courses as there have been beforehand. And we actually do teach how to use that. So I'm not saying it's
Most people aren't wanting to print 500 of something.
right.
These are great for when you're printing 10 to 20 to 25 of your
Exactly.
invitations or something.
Yeah. And it's super satisfying too.
Mhm.
The other thing, if you're not that into it or you're going to move, this can be easily created, and there's a wide market for these smaller presses. If you have a larger floor model press, there's a smaller market. Many you'll see when they're advertised, local only, you pick up, we'll help you load your truck, and that's it. So it's harder to get rid of, or if it's not quite doing what you want to upgrade, you've got that problem.
Moving them is a big problem.
And moving is a big problem. It can be dangerous.
Yeah.
So
these are.
I know Jessica's used professional movers.
Yes.
And of course, they just had some huge equipment go into the new printing museum location, which I wish I could have seen it, but I was busy that afternoon. I know Jessica was there. They moved 4 pieces in. Five huge pieces of equipment into the new museum. They actually had to take part of a outside wall there to do it. Anyway, we're getting
which is not necessary for these small ones.
One thing I will tell you, the Kelsey Press is associated with hobbyist printing, and it's something that the commercial printer would look down on it. I mean, they might have a Chandler and Price pilot press if somebody wanted 25 of something. That they might have that as a commercial professional piece of equipment, partly because it's made by Chandler and Price, and they've got a big one of those presses there. But let me just show you. I meant to get this out.
But I think where you're going is the quality of the printing on these small presses, even though they're hobby presses, is quite beautiful.
Yes. Yes. Okay,
What are you looking for?
here it is. A little ink. There's Kelsey. I mean, they're going to tell you all. Kelsey, it's called the Printer's Guide. Why don't you just open it? And they should have it. You can find this reprinted online. And here, Jessica and I made a number of different things from at the printing museum. And this one is, we actually have a plate, do your own printing, develop a profitable business. And they sell everything that you need for that. So we just made a little poster about Kelsey Company. The museum has quite an extensive collection of Kelsey presses.
The irony is we did not print that poster on.
On the Kelsey,
No.
that's right. That was printed on one of those large
Yeah.
presses. But
You want to show some examples of things that you have printed, the
sure,
quality?
why don't I do that? Let me just just go through some items that are the same for small presses and large presses. Type, you use exactly the same type. You can use polymer plates, which I'll show you. You can use linoleum cuts here. I printed two of our daughter's wedding invitations, and this is a linoleum cut with an orange slice that was used on my one daughter's.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, and in my, this would have been on that golden pearl, but it would do just fine in this press.
Did you have to bring it up to type high?
Yes, this is not quite type high linoleum blocks. So you add a little cardboard or something that you print. You can buy for $1 or $2. You can buy little bits. Am I good?
Yep.
Yeah. You can buy little bits of linoleum. This is 2x2 squares, and make your own designs and incorporate them with regular.
Yeah, they print beautifully.
They do. The ink, it's the same ink. The graphic design and typesetting is a skill that you need to learn that is exactly the same. Putting your set type into that frame.
You want me to come over there, or are you gonna bring it here?
I can bring it over.
Okay.
Here's a form
I'm coming
in
down.
the chase.
There we go.
And there's the type. You put wood blocks around it that it's called furniture. And then these little squeezers are called coins, Q-U-O-I-N-S. They expand and squeeze this perfectly rectangular block in place. And if we look at the back side, you can see how everything is flat and level. And these little knobs have been ground perfectly, so everything is level when you lock it in the press, and when you tighten up the type in the frame on this metal surface.
What size do you think is the max form for a 6.5 by 10?
That's a good question. This is 6 by 10. My printing area, well, there's a page number here, but let's just say it's this by this, maybe 2.5 by 4. I've heard two rules that you can print 50% of the area of your frame or 2/3. And I think it depends really on a judgment as to how much of a surface is ink. If you use very fine type and it's very spread out, you can probably print a larger area. I'm not talking about the size of the paper. The paper can be as big as that platen or even bigger. It can stick out over the sides. There are ways to work with that. We're talking just about the printed area. It's how many pounds per square inch of compression you can put on with your press.
And it decreases as you get closer to the edges, which
That's
is why
right.
you can't print all the way to the edges.
That's right.
Or I shouldn't say you can't, you don't get as good a quality.
Right. And I found
Yeah.
with this,
You want me to come over?
sure. See, the same 4 movements are going on here. The platen is coming up to meet the type, and the type's not in here. This frame would be placed in. But it's not set up to take that form, so we're not doing it. The rollers are moving. The ink discs are turning, and the grippers are gripping the paper. Same thing, they all do. But, take a look at the platen here. It's not as heavy as the Golding Official.
It's not.
No, I think, and sometimes with larger forms, I find that this Kelsey press right in the center is just a little bit low. So what we do is add some packing paper behind
To compensate. For the
to
lowering.
compensate. Yep.
Mm.
And these are all skills and experience that you have to learn to do beautiful work.
And it's probably unique to each press and the wear on each press.
Yes, for sure. You can adjust the position of that platen with these screws from behind. There's a large spring that is pulling the metal platen backwards up against these screws that go through this plate onto the back of the platen. This holds it in place, but it also holds everything against these screws, and they can be adjusted for bringing forward or back, or to make sure it's exactly level with this press bed.
Would you say if somebody gets a brand new press, they should really check for balancing?
Yes.
Mhm.
Use press, even a new one. You don't know whether they probably haven't done that.
So like one side or top or bottom may be printing more heavily, or the platen may be closer.
Right. Put this in
Yeah.
position so you can see it. Now can't do this because you see the little, these are called gauge pins. They hold the paper in place. And you can see right there, I was doing a return address on some envelopes. You always try and keep the type in the center of the platen so that you're not pushing the platen to one side and it gets out of balance.
Because what would happen if you close the press right now?
Excuse me, if I close the press right now, these grippers would touch this type and they'd smush it, and we'd have some donations to the hell box.
That's right.
And I might say some things like that. So I won't do that. Okay. And they all, so you just.
Oh yeah, hold on, let me get your head out of the way.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just go like that, and we're out. I have a 3/4 or 1 inch thick metal base for locking everything up in the chase. That's called imposing or imposition. You really could, if you had a piece of plywood with with Formica to start with, that would probably be good enough. Or it wouldn't have to be as thick. You could even use, here's a tray called a galley. This is where we keep set type, and this is all type that I've hand set. Let me get a little sip of water. Jessica will move you around there.
These are all lockups that you are going to be printing on your smaller presses.
Yes, or have printed.
Or have printed, yeah. You're going to show us examples of
I'll show
those?
you a couple of examples, yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. This is an invitation to our daughter's and son-in-law's 10-year anniversary, wedding anniversary.
Which press did you print
all
this on?
hands. I did that on the Kelsey.
That is very like it's hard for you guys to see, but he's got these beautiful ornaments that have very fine details, and the Kelsey is printing those.
Perfect. I would, and look at the back. The objective of fine printing is not to emboss, not to push that type into the paper, it's called a kiss impression. That takes some experience to be able to do that. That's when the type behaves best. And you can see there's still that little bit of variation, like that E is just slightly heavier.
Their last name out. You want to
Oh,
keep
yeah,
going.
yeah.
Trying to protect some identities here. I don't know if they can see this slight variation. Now that could also be a little bit of the texture in your paper.
It
maybe.
could, yeah.
Yeah.
But that just tells you it's letterpress.
Yep.
Another long-term project, did you want me to
I
explain?
wanted, well, you were talking about the kiss impression, the alternative of which is the punch, right? That
Right.
a lot of people associate with letterpress.
Right.
What is your feeling on the capacity for tabletop presses?
Limited, you can use a little bit softer paper, a little bit thicker, so that it can actually emboss just slightly.
Deboss, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
deboss.
Somebody had a question, I think I saw pop up. I think it was about what typeface you're using on that.
Yes, on this one.
Is that correct, Lynn? You wanted to know the typeface that Dan is using?
Yeah,
That's the
that
question in
is.
the chat. And what is the difference between a typeface and font might be helpful to know.
Oh, the difference between a typeface is the general design. And in letterpress printing, we could take a look down here. You need a different font for each size. So let's see.
Yeah, so the typeface is the overall design, and then a font is a particular, like 12-point Gaudi is the font, 14-point Gaudi is the font, but Gaudi is the typeface. That's my understanding.
Correct.
Although in today's modern digital world,
it's the same thing.
They get interused,
Yes.
but in letterpress, sometimes we separate those out a little bit more.
And they are different. That was set in 18-point Duchess.
Oh, Duchess.
Which is, I have just a small amount of it. There's the Q. My main font and my main man in letterpress design is Frederick Gaudi. And that's a good. I study him. This is a reprint. This is originally in 2 volumes. Every 2 pages or 2 or 3 pages is a different type design by Frederick Gaudi. And the one I really love is Gaudi Old Style. So my main type, I don't have that many. I gave 2/3 of my type away.
Because when I
move.
This is so heavy.
So if you can take a look here.
Hold that still.
That's what I mainly print with, Gaudi Old Style. And the main is 12-point Gaudi Old Style.
These are the ones you have in-house.
This is what I have in-house. I have smaller amounts of some. I also have small caps in 12-point.
And we had another question
Adrian?
about type in the chase, since you've got it right there. So somebody asked, could you deliberately print something larger than 2/3 of the area to create a feathered or faded or feathered edge? Is that what happens if you fill it up too full?
Yes. Oh, what happens? You'll find if it's just jammed with type like this, and I go all the way out to the edge as far as I can, you'll find that when you do this last little ½ inch, you're putting incredible pressure on the press. You can actually feel it as this goes down. And you think, sure, I hope it doesn't break. And it might.
That's if you put type all the way to the edge of your chase. Okay.
And most presses, even floor model presses, have problems if you're trying to use that whole area. It's not
Right.
exactly, it's either the bed that works, you know, 1,000th of an inch, or the platen that'll work a little bit, or a little of both.
So it's less about damaging to the type and more about you could damage your press.
Damage the press and
Okay.
you can't get it, and you just have real trouble getting a good impression.
Okay, yeah.
Now, well, let me transition to my main project these days. I am producing and printing a 48-page excerpt of Ben Franklin's autobiography. It tells the story of him leaving his brother as an apprentice in Boston and traveling to New York and then walking across New Jersey to Philadelphia in October of 1723. And all the people he meets, it's interesting because he's telling about this as a 71-year-old man when he was 17 years old.
Oh,
So
wow.
it's more than a, you know, he himself becomes the character. Anyway.
And you're printing
You're
printing the whole book on this press.
I am. And I'm printing this on this press, and this is a page right here. And well, let me just show you. And I show you this just to illustrate that you can do some serious printing. I'm printing it in two varieties. The first is with signatures. So on a sheet this size with A, B, C, D pages. And I have the whole thing. Here's how I still use the modern computer system. Here's the design for all 48 pages. And what I did,
I think the impressive part here is you're printing a book on a small tabletop press.
yeah,
A whole book.
and you can see here's New Jersey. Maybe you can't see that.
No,
but it is. That's New Jersey. Philadelphia is right there. And this is his trip with little numbers. This will be in a separate color, overlaid in a second printing over this.
And these are polymer plates that you'll
Those will be polymer plates.
Uh-huh.
And here I have preset it with Gaudi old style on my computer. It's not quite the same. It spaces just differently. I have the margins set, and then I've gone in and that's the preface that I wrote.
But you're doing that to help you know how many words and letters per line.
Yes.
You can use.
Yes, because I'm not printing it sequentially.
Right.
The pages obviously are sequential, but the printing is not. So it has to be all planned out. And but see here's an FL. That's called a ligature. And there are special pieces of type that combine FL, FIs, FFIs, etc. So I found them to remind me to set the type properly with the ligatures. Also, I don't like these little hanging eyes. The computer doesn't mind, but I do. So I move it, tell myself to move it, that arrow belongs there, move it down a little bit, move this eye to the next page. It's a little more dramatic. Boston, when I reflected that, turn the page, I had already made myself. There's an FI, and I can see how it works out. And then I know that for this 4-page, for one sheet of paper, there'll be four pages.
Correct.
And so the front and back, and I know what belongs on each one. And then as I set it, I know what the margins should be. Little in the inside margin.
Hold on. Dan lost his
And while you're doing,
communication.
and Dan, while you're doing that, there is a question if you,
Sure.
there's a question to talk about the easiest way you find to get good registration on a tabletop press. So
That's a great
That's a
question.
great question. What's the easiest way?
Let's transition to that.
whenever you get a chance.
Registration between the two colors. Yes.
Like two colors. They're talking about a two color.
Two colors. I do it generally. I'll start, as you can see with that invitation. It's printed right on this Timpin paper, and I do my measurements right from that. I would do the second color right on this. And then I just print some extras and will make micro adjustments of the gauge pins. And I have several different types of gauge pins.
Can I share a different method
Sure.
too? So some people I know are, they've got their Timpin, this paper, and they have a piece of clear acetate and they're printing directly on the acetate, and then they put the paper they want to print with their first color underneath. And so then they can see, it's a visual.
And they've already got the edges.
Right. So you can do it math way, which is kind of what you're doing it by measuring with your pico pole, or if you're a more visual person and math isn't your strength, you can use a clear piece of acetate and print directly on there and then position your first piece underneath it. And both of those work really well.
They do. The one thing I don't like is that is the thickness of the acetate.
Yes.
And that in with a lighter press like that, it can just throw things off a little bit.
Okay.
But that's probably
gets you close.
The more accurate way. Your way will get
with the acetate
closer. But sometimes
I've used both. I think they both work, but you're right. I tend to use acetate on my bigger, larger floor model presses.
So just to end, I just pulled a page out and you can see, look at the quality of the printing that's possible.
Yes, this is the Kelsey press, and I don't know how well it's coming through, but the quality of the printing is very, very high. And this is considered a hobby level press. Now, some of this, of course, is Dan, your longtime experience printing, you know, understanding how to problem solve. But
and great paper. This is Lettra, which is 100% cotton rag, and it there's probably no better paper to take letterpress ink.
Yeah, 100% cotton for sure. Yeah. But I think you don't necessarily have to have a big fancy press to get nice quality printing.
There are 30 copies.
30?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't know how many books I'm actually going to make, but it's not going to be more than 30. It's whatever, it's the least common denominator of these 12 sheets that will have 4 printings. So that all came from, can you use the larger paper? I only print 1/4 of that at a time. You can obviously print 2 sides, but I print 1 page and then it will be flipped to do the adjacent page.
But you could have printed it on, if you wanted the dimensions of your book to be larger, you could have a much larger piece of paper in there.
Yes. And on a floor model press, you'd set up 2 of these side by side in the chase, and you would just print 2 of them together.
But as you can see, like, there's nothing impeding you putting like an 11 by 17 sheet of paper in there, for example.
Right.
Just for our audience, like your let's see. Oh, somebody says, how do you apply ink to the disc? What's your method?
Oh, that's good.
Adrian, how are we doing on time too?
Yeah.
We got about 20 more minutes for
Okay.
the full session, less if you want to open it up for more Q&A, but we're doing great.
Yeah, we love the questions. So yeah.
I like Southern Ink. I do buy my ink from them.
I do too.
And Jess does too for the museum and personally.
Yep.
Yep.
They're here in Texas, in Austin.
They're in Austin, and they will custom
mix any color that you want from the Pantone system. To print here, you put on about as much ink as you put on your toothbrush. It might be a good starter.
That may be subjective.
Okay.
Are you going to show?
No,
you're not
I
gonna-
can ink it.
Oh,
You want me to?
Yeah.
Okay. Just one.
I will clean up your press for you.
No.
I'll help you clean up your press. I think people do like to see this part.
Okay. I need a plier.
I will say too, in my experience, and I don't have the same level of experience Dan does, but in my experience, I start with less ink
Yes.
because it's always easy to add more. But I tend to print with wood type, and Dan tends to print with metal type. And with metal type, you tend to want less ink, and with wood type, because there's a larger surface area you're trying to cover, I sometimes put a little bit more ink. Okay.
I also have cans
Or cans. Yeah.
or cans, but sometimes the ink dries here and it's hard to get it out.
Yeah.
And then you're scooping ink out and you get little runs of it. I love these tubes.
Especially for the home printer. Cans just will last the average hobby printer or somebody getting started forever. There you go.
And
Here's
another chat tip is a good suggestion they heard was to start with a dab of ink about the size of a lima bean, and that's worked well enough for them to remember.
Yeah. That's about, yours looked like it was a little bit between a lima bean and a pea.
Yes.
And then I see you got it very thinly applied.
Thinly applied.
Mm-hmm.
And then now you ink without your form in the press, because otherwise you'd have blobs of ink on the type.
Very important. That is a rookie mistake I have made.
Beautiful.
And you see there's just a slight orange peel effect there. That's about right.
Yeah, a little bit of a blob, but
Yeah,
yeah,
it's getting there.
it'll get there.
Now, actually, I can put this in.
Oh, good.
Here's a return address. Hopefully it'll work.
You have 2 chases. How many chases do you have?
2 chases.
Okay.
We went to the International Printing Museum.
We did.
Go to Houston's Printing Museum.
Wherever you are.
Yeah.
There are 3 printing museums in the United States. So if you're on the West Coast, the International Printing Museum. There on the East Coast is the MOP, Museum of Printing. And here on the 3rd coast in Gulf Coast, Houston, we are the Museum of Printing.
And don't forget Hamilton.
Oh, yeah.
I consider Hamilton a printing museum too.
So this is Timpin paper, and I've got some packing under here, which hopefully is what we need. And
But you
can see how
adjust
the
it.
paper is held there. If this was a floor model press, I'd turn it on and it would start moving. And I'd have to take the printed out, put this one in, and you have to work with that press. Here, if that's not quite right,
I'm gonna back up just a second.
okay,
Okay.
if that's not in the right position, I can just fiddle with it till it's nicely against the gauge pins. In a floor model press, even one that you're pumping with your foot, if you've got to go in there again, which is almost irresistible not to, you're in the danger zone because this thing's closing. You think, oh, I can fix that. Yeah,
But this you don't have that problem.
right. You
You're-
don't have that problem.
You control the speed, the
You
timing.
see that last little bit?
You want, yeah. Do you want to show the address?
No.
So
Sorry. Yeah.
that is printing and inking. And then, of course, the follow-up question is, what do you clean the press with? What the type
Right.
and rollers? What is best for cleaning those types and rollers?
$1 million question.
Right.
Yes, and you're going to get all kinds of answers to what people use, all the way from kerosene and gasoline,
Yep.
which is an old salts approach.
Yep.
I use, and you get very good at cleaning your press. I can use just the smallest dab. I use odorless paint thinner.
Yeah.
And this is
Mineral spirits, yeah.
this is 5 years worth. And it feels like there's about half of it in here still.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a good question.
What do you do with your rags?
That's what's going to be. I do what we did at the printing museum. I use just a little bit, and when I'm done, I take them outside and put them on the stones and let everything, let the ink oxidize and get hard on there, and let the little bit of thinner evaporate.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I notice that they're out there a few days later, I bring them inside to use this as the first rag to clean this off. And I'll wipe this off. Pipe goes out first. You don't clean the pipe.
Lynn, he uses mineral spirits. He uses low odor mineral spirits, paint thinner. In my press, in my garage, I've been using something that's a little bit pricier called Eco House. But I think it's got a lower flame point. This question is a great question, and it's very personal to each person's shops, if they have any chemical sensitivities, what their I don't know, just kind of perspective is on chemicals, just in general. I would say in the museum, I have used California Wash, which is a low odor mineral spirits. I've also used other forms of mineral spirits, and this one is not popular and rather controversial. I will occasionally use Crisco to loosen up my ink just a little bit in solid form. But then I have to finish it up with a mineral spirit because you can't leave the Crisco on. I reserve the Crisco for my very largest press.
This is a rubber-based ink that will set, but you can leave this on here for better part of the day.
Yes.
Print two separate things with it.
That's the beauty of rubber base. I talked to Southern Ink.
Yeah.
And they consider their ink kind of a hybrid. They do put a bit of dryer in it. So unlike traditional rubber ink, you do eventually want to clean it off your press because it will dry.
Yeah. So, other just thing to show you quickly. There are 6 illustrations in this book, and my daughter drew the illustrations with pen and ink. And these are polymer plates. This is the actual printing. It's pretty colored.
Oh, this is the actual print?
Ink. Yep. I mean, they're probably still just proofs as I was getting things ready. But
that's from polymer?
Mm-hmm. Isn't that nice?
Yeah. It looks like a drawing. Still looks like a
I know
drawing.
it looks like her drawing,
Yeah.
but no, that's definitely.
That's a print.
That's it. Yeah. And here, this is the polymer plate, and that is matched. It's got self-adhesive on the back, and that goes on a very special base. This is an aluminum base. It's got, if you want to use them, it's got a graph paper on here, so you keep it on squarely.
This is made by Boxcar, by the way.
Boxcar Press, yes, and there's a reference in the sheet. This that will go on there, and then this is just like a big piece of tape. But look at it. This is a lot of area of inking. So I would use the grippers to help pull the paper away from the type. And I won't say this is the limit of what you can do with a tabletop press, but probably wouldn't do twice the size. It's not as bad as you think, though. This is 6 by 10, so that's 60 square inches. It doesn't mean that you can only print a 3x5 area. That's only 25% of the area. It means you can print 30 square inches.
Oh.
And so you only reduce one of the dimensions. You can do 30 square inches, which is 5x6 if you want. And you make that a little smaller if you've got a lot of area printing, or a little larger if you've got just plain type. I'd like to say something where in favor again of the desktop, my tabletop press. You can use, when we set the type, we use a little, it's called the composing stick, a little handheld device that we can set the type in. And between each line, we have a little length of thin lead called leading. And that would go in. It has to be a little longer. And I've just, you can move this side. So you bring it in so it's not super tight, but it's just snug. And then you go to your type. And I do it sitting down this way. And some people say don't, because if it comes out, it'll fall on the floor, but knock on wood, that doesn't happen so far in my life. So I just have a piece of vinyl upholstery material. And this is the California job case. And this is my main type, 12-point Goudy old style. And you would just.
That's the lay of the case.
Yes. And you would just pick up, put a space in, and pick up, and I'm left-handed, so I do it right side up, right to left. People who are not left-handed.
Yeah, most of us do it this way.
Do it this way, upside down, left to right.
Or you can just print with polymer too, if you don't feel like collecting hundreds of pounds of metal type.
I use so much of this. There's one page, and there are 3 other pages, 2 of them waiting to be printed. And so 2 of these waiting to be distributed. If you put the type back after you're done in this same case, it'll end up being on top, and there'll be a bunch of brand new stuff down there toward the bottom. Here's capital A's. That if you dig in a little bit, they've never been used. So if you do use one of those and you keep reusing the top type, that top type after a while prints just a little heavier, and you can notice it in a page of.
Oh, really?
Yeah, in a page like this. So I have down here in the bottom, it says 12-point Goudy old style redistributed. So when I take one of these apart and it's called redistributing, putting it back in, I put it down in this case.
That's an empty free case to put your, so you're always pulling from new type, or at least you're recycling.
And I let this run down until there's nothing left. Like this is for lowercase t, and I've got about less than 10 t's here. So when I'm done with them, I stop for a minute and go down and look at all the t's down there, just waiting to come back to life. They're right there.
Yeah.
I'll just take some of them and put them in. It recycles the type, and in general, your type lasts longer and your work looks better when you're doing that.
That's right, Dan. That's a really good tip about studio practices and management that we don't normally get. So our crowd today is fairly diverse. We have about 5 more minutes, but to let you know kind of more about our group, we have somebody with 2 tabletop presses but hasn't used them yet, someone with no experience with presses, all the way to somebody with a Vandercook and no place to put it and thinking of downsizing. Madonna, a baby 3x5 Kelsey. And so just to reiterate on those print sizes. So if it says it's a 5x8 press, So the maximum, the chase would be 5 by 8 inches, but only about half of that is a
Right.
printable printing area, right?
Half the area. Don't go 5 by 8, don't go 2.5 by 4. Because, 5/8 is 40 square inches. You could do about 20 square inches.
So do it in the square inches.
Right, do it in square inches.
Okay, so
Yeah. Let me say a couple quick things about buying type and these leads and slugs. In the printing museum, we have these in continuous lengths. They're measured in picas, which is 1/6 of an inch, and a pica is 12 points. So that's printer's math that you need to know for the tabletop press and for the biggest press in the land. And I think we may have seen it. We all went to the Chronicles
newspaper.
Printing operation and saw quite a huge number of presses, huge size presses. Anyway, here I don't have that. I have 2 sizes of leads and slugs. I have 18 picas, which is 3 inches, and I have 24, which is 4 inches. And I print everything with that. And every once in a while, I'll need something a little longer. I have a few longer pieces I can cut, and I won't go down in there, but I have some cutoffs of smaller pieces, like when I did that, the return address that you saw there. I didn't cut these. I have the type founder, and M&H type will do this for you. Ariane Press, M&H type. I told them I want, 20 pounds. They sell this by the pounded of 24-inch. These are 3-point leads. Could you show them? Maybe see how it's cut. This is cut with a metal saw, a special saw that's used in letterpress design. So these are perfect in length. They're all the same. There are no rough edges, no burrs, no nothing. And I like that. I could use this 4-inch, and even if I only have a 1-inch, 3 words I want to say, I can put spacing on either side of there.
So then you don't have to have every space.
And I don't have to have every size. And then I keep, because of that, I have extra space.
And Dan, before we get too far into printer's math, I do want to ask a question that we have from a
Sure.
person in the chat about the ink disc. So their Kelsey has an ink disc that is matte black and doesn't need to be shiny and clean. So they don't think that it's painted, but they can't be sure.
That is a great question. You could, if you think there's some ink or something on there, you could try a paint stripper to see if that comes off. It does not need to be super shiny. In fact, you don't want to do that to say use carborundum paper or something to bring it down to where it looks like fine silverware on the dining room table. Let me bring a disc here. If you look at them and look at yours, I don't know if we can see it. There are little grooves, and if you run your finger across, you can feel how there are circular concentric grooves in there. Certainly, you can really see it in my larger Kelsey. I can see it here in the light reflection.
It holds ink better.
It holds ink better. And if it's too smooth, and if you're using a little bit lighter ink, the rollers, instead of rolling across the ink, will just slide like you're slipping on the ice. And then it's snow plowing some ink up in a line onto your roller. And then as it goes by, it may turn or it may not, and smudge it a little, and then give a heavier application of ink onto the type. So I mean, and you'll see in some of those restored presses, they're super shiny. It looks cool, but when I did this, there's still some pock marks here and there, but you can't feel them.
Yeah,
And so-
our discs at the Printing Museum are in a, one of them was black, but I would strip it.
Yes.
I would get it back down to metal, but I wouldn't polish it, I think is the main point.
Yep. Yep.
Did that answer that person's question about the ink disc?
Very helpful tip. And we are at time, so that'll be our last question today.
Okay.
Do you
Well,
have any
thank
closing
you for
thoughts?
spending part of the morning with us. I really enjoyed this. Thank you, Adrian, for holding things together and doing a great job with the presentation. And of course, thank you, Jessica, for contributing here and for the great video.
Being the disembodied voice on the other side.
Come visit us at the museum when we reopen in the new location on San Jacinto at Elgin.
Yep.
Yeah. And, you know, even if you're from out of state, come and spend a couple days and attend one of our presentations and get ink on your hands. We really would love to have you, and I think you'd have a fun time. Doesn't matter what you know or don't know, or
All are welcome.
All are welcome.
Yep.
And we
Yep.
would,
Absolutely.
you know, a bunch we'd love to learn from what you know.
I know.
too.
I agree.
So that's great.
Yeah. Thank
We
you,
have-
everyone. We appreciate.
We have a variety of classes too in all these topics. And we do have one on photopolymer plates coming up that Jessica is going to teach in the spring. We have planned to have ink and drinks. So if you're in the Houston area, no experience necessary. You know, come
Casual.
get experience with the press, just have fun coming away with something that you've printed. So we have a variety of offerings and we do hope you'll visit us. Thank you so much, Dan, for your expertise.
You're welcome.
Time today.
Thank you, everyone.
The pleasure.
Have a
Thank
great
you.
Saturday.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.